What happens when a country music superstar and a beloved morning show host clash on live television? The answer turned out to be far more explosive than anyone could have imagined. Jason Aldean, known for his chart-topping hits and his no-nonsense attitude, sat down for what was supposed to be a routine interview on the Today Show with Roker. But within minutes, the conversation took a sharp and unexpected turn that left the entire studio in stunned silence. Voices were raised, accusations flew, and before anyone could process what was happening, Aldean ripped off his microphone and walked off the set. This wasn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. It was something else entirely, a moment that would spark headlines and online debates for days. The morning began like any other at Rockefeller Plaza. Roker, ever the consummate professional, greeted viewers with his trademark charm and easy smile. He cracked jokes about the weather and kept the studio audience laughing. Jason Aldean arrived early, around 7 o'clock, dressed casually in jeans, a black button-down shirt, and his signature baseball cap. He appeared relaxed, chatting with producers, sipping coffee, and joking with crew members. There was no sign that anything unusual was about to happen. The plan was simple: talk about his new album, upcoming tour dates, and life on the road. Just another feel-good segment for morning television. When the cameras began rolling at 8:15, everything went smoothly. Al welcomed Jason warmly, congratulated him on his recent success, and invited him to talk about his music. Jason smiled easily, expressing gratitude for his fans and excitement about the new songs. The two discussed his favorite cities to perform in, and the thrill of connecting with audiences live. When Al asked about his family, Jason's demeanor softened. He spoke affectionately about his kids and the balance between fame and fatherhood. The audience was fully engaged, loving every minute of the wholesome conversation. But then Al shifted gears. "So, Jason," he began, still smiling but with a noticeably more serious tone, "I want to talk about something that's been on a lot of people's minds. Your music has always connected with a certain audience, a certain demographic. But lately, there's been conversation about who feels welcome at your shows, who feels included in the country music community you represent. How do you respond to people who say your brand of country music doesn't speak to everyone?" Jason's smile faltered slightly. He shifted in his seat, clearly caught off guard by the sudden change in tone. "Well, Al," he said carefully, "I make music for people who love country music. I don't think about demographics or who's supposed to like what. I tell stories that matter to me, about where I come from and the values I was raised with. If people connect with that, great. If not, that's okay too. I'm not trying to be everything to everyone." Al nodded, but his expression suggested he wasn't entirely satisfied. "Sure, I understand that," he continued. "But when you say values and where you come from, some people hear that as code for something else. There's been criticism that country music and artists like yourself have created a space that feels exclusive rather than inclusive. Does that concern you at all?" Jason's jaw tightened, his demeanor changing instantly. "Al, I'll be honest with you," he said, his voice firm. "I think that's a pretty unfair characterization. I've never said or done anything to make anyone feel unwelcome. My shows are for anyone who wants to be there. I've got fans from all walks of life. The idea that I'm creating some kind of exclusive space just isn't true. That's a narrative pushed by people who don't listen to my music or come to my shows." Al leaned forward slightly, still calm but pressing further. "But Jason, it's not just about what you say, it's about the imagery, the themes, the culture around your music. When you sing about small-town life and traditional values, that resonates differently with different people. For some it feels like home. For others it's a reminder of places where they weren't accepted." Jason let out a short, frustrated laugh. "So now I can't sing about my own life? I can't write songs about growing up in a small town because it might make somebody uncomfortable? That doesn't make sense, Al. Every artist writes from their own experience. Nobody questions that in other genres. But when it's country, when it's a guy like me, suddenly I'm supposed to apologize for where I come from." By this point, the tension in the studio was undeniable. The easy camaraderie from earlier had evaporated, replaced by a charged silence. Crew members exchanged nervous glances. The audience shifted in their seats and Al seemed torn between pushing further or backing off. But Jason's expression made it clear he had said enough. Moments later, he removed his microphone, muttered something under his breath, and stood up, walking off set as cameras continued rolling. The stunned silence that followed said everything. Crew Crew members exchanged uneasy glances as the air in the studio grew heavy. The audience sat in an uncomfortable silence, unsure where to look. To his credit, Al Roker didn't back down. "I'm not asking you to apologize for where you come from, Jason," he said evenly. "I'm asking if you understand why some people feel alienated by the culture that's been built around country music. There's a difference between celebrating your roots and creating a space that, intentionally or not, pushes certain people out." Jason's face flushed, his voice rising slightly as frustration broke through his composure. "Who exactly is being pushed out, Al? Tell me. Because I see people of all kinds at my concerts. Families, young people, old people, people who look like me and people who don't. The only people who seem to have a problem with country music are the ones who've already decided they don't like it. They've already made up their minds that artists like me represent something we don't." Al remained calm, though his tone sharpened as he pressed further. "Jason, after your song Try That in a Small Town came out, there was a lot of controversy. People felt that the lyrics, the imagery in the video, it all painted a very specific picture. And that picture made a lot of people uncomfortable. Do you understand why that happened?" And there it was. The moment everything changed. Jason's entire demeanor hardened. He straightened in his chair, eyes locked on Al with a glare that made everyone in the studio tense. "Here we go," he muttered, his voice low but cutting. "I knew that's where this was headed. You didn't bring me here to talk about my music or my tour. You brought me here to ambush me with this garbage again." Al raised his hands in a calming gesture. "Jason, it's not an ambush. It's a legitimate question. That song sparked a national conversation. You can't just pretend it didn't happen." Jason pointed a finger at Al, his voice now booming across the studio. "A national conversation? You mean a manufactured controversy created by people who twisted my words to make me look like something I'm not? That song was about standing up for your community, about not tolerating crime and violence. But instead of listening to what I said, people projected their own assumptions onto it. And now here you are doing the exact same thing on national television." Al's expression remained steady, but there was an unmistakable edge to his voice now. "When you release a song with lyrics about taking justice into your own hands, filmed in front of a courthouse with a history of violence, you have to expect people to ask questions. You have to take responsibility for how your message is received." Jason shot up from his chair, the movement so sudden it startled everyone on set. "Responsibility?" he snapped. "You want to talk about responsibility, Al? How about the responsibility of journalists to tell the truth instead of pushing agendas? How about the responsibility not to twist someone's words just to get clicks?" Al rose too, his stance firm. "I'm not twisting anything, Jason. I'm asking direct questions about your work and its impact. If you can't handle that, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews." The studio went dead silent. Jason stared at Al for a long moment, his face a storm of anger and disbelief. Finally, he said flatly, "You know what, Al? You're right. I shouldn't be doing this interview because this isn't an interview. It's a setup." With that, Jason reached for his microphone pack, fumbling with the clip at his belt. A producer hurried forward, trying to calm him, but Jason waved him off. Al stood firm, arms crossed, watching as the country star wrestled with the equipment. The audience remained frozen, unsure if this was somehow scripted or frighteningly real. The look on everyone's faces made it clear. This was no act. "Jason, come on," Al said softly, trying to de-escalate. "Sit back down. Let's talk about this like adults." Jason finally yanked the microphone free and tossed it onto the chair he'd just vacated. "Talk about it like adults," he barked. "You ambushed me on live TV, accused me of making people feel unwelcome, dragged up a controversy you know was blown out of proportion, and now you want to act civil?" "No, Al, I'm done. I came here in good faith and you turned this into a hit piece." Al shook his head slowly. "This isn't a hit piece, Jason. These are questions people want answered. Your fans, your critics, the public. You have a massive platform. You don't get to dismiss legitimate concerns just because they make you uncomfortable." Jason laughed bitterly, running a hand over his face. "Legitimate concerns? You keep saying that like it means something. Tell me, Al, did you even listen to that song all the way through? Did you read the lyrics yourself without someone telling you what to think? Or did you just read the headlines and decide I must be guilty of whatever people accused me of?" Al's expression tightened. The tension in the room was unbearable. Every camera stayed fixed on them, the audience holding its breath as the confrontation teetered between debate and disaster. "I've listened to the song, Jason," Al began, his voice steady but firm. "I understand what you say it's about, but you can't control how people interpret your art. And when a significant number of people interpret it as threatening or exclusionary, you have to at least acknowledge that." Jason immediately shot back, his frustration evident. "Why? Why do I have to acknowledge an interpretation that's wrong? If I write a song about protecting your community and standing against crime, and someone decides that's somehow racist or threatening, that's on them, not me. I'm not responsible for other people's bad faith interpretations of my work." Al took a step closer, his voice rising slightly for the first time. "But Jason, art doesn't exist in a vacuum. The images you chose, the location you filmed in, the timing of the release, all of that shapes how people receive the message. You filmed that video in front of a courthouse where a lynching happened. You can't tell me that was just a coincidence." Jason's face turned red. "I filmed it in my hometown, Al, in a place that means something to me. I didn't choose that location because of something that happened decades before I was born. I chose it because it's where I'm from. But people like you went digging through history to find anything you could use to make me look bad. That's not journalism. That's character assassination." In the control room, the producer was frantically signaling, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let the clash continue. Al glanced briefly toward the crew, then turned back to Jason, deciding in real time to push forward. "Character assassination? Jason, I'm asking questions. If your character can't withstand questions, that's not my fault." Jason's voice shook with anger. "You're not asking questions, Al. You're making accusations dressed up as questions. There's a difference. When you ask if I understand why people feel alienated, you're implying that I am alienating them. When you bring up controversy, you're implying that the outrage was justified. You already made up your mind about me. This whole thing was just theater to confirm what you already believed." Al's tone was measured but cutting. "If I've made up my mind, Jason, it's based on evidence. Your song, your imagery, your response to criticism. You've been defensive from the start instead of showing any understanding or empathy for why people were upset." Jason's voice cracked with frustration. "Empathy? You want to talk about empathy? Where's the empathy for me, Al? Where's the empathy for the artist who poured his heart into a song only to have it twisted and weaponized against him? Where's the empathy for someone who's been called every name in the book, whose family has been threatened, who's been painted as a villain for writing something people chose to misunderstand?" Al's jaw tightened. "Jason, when you have a platform as big as yours, you accept certain responsibilities. Your words and images carry weight. They have consequences, and when those consequences make people feel unsafe or unwelcome, you don't get to claim victimhood." Jason stepped forward, not aggressively but with exasperation. "Making people feel unsafe? Are you hearing yourself right now? It's a song, Al, 3 minutes of music. Nobody is unsafe because of a country song. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're turning something harmless into a threat because it fits the story you want to tell." Al's voice rose. "It's not harmless to everyone, Jason. That's what you're not getting. To some people, the imagery of Southern justice, of taking matters into your own hands, of small towns protecting their own, that carries historical weight. It reminds them of real violence, real trauma." Jason's response came quick, his voice firm. "Then those people need to understand context. I'm talking about standing up to criminals, not targeting innocent people. I'm talking about law and order, not vigilante justice. But nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to give me the benefit of the doubt. They just want to be offended." Al countered sharply. "Maybe they're not looking to be offended, Jason. Maybe they have legitimate reasons to be concerned when someone with your platform uses that kind of language. Maybe they've lived through experiences that make them hear your words differently than you intended. Did you ever consider that?" "Of course I considered it," Jason said, his voice strained but unwavering. "And I rejected it, because it means accepting that my words mean something other than what I said. It means I'm responsible for how someone else interprets my art through their baggage, and I don't accept that. I wrote what I wrote. I said what I said. If people twist it into something else, that's their problem, not mine." The audience was completely silent now, every eye glued to the two men standing in the middle of the set. This was no longer a celebrity interview. It was an ideological standoff, raw and unfiltered. Al Roker, usually the epitome of calm professionalism, looked visibly angry. "That's incredibly dismissive, Jason," Al said quietly, but with steel in his voice. "To just write off people's concerns as their problem, to refuse to even consider that you might have handled things differently, that's not the mark of someone who actually cares about their impact." Jason's laugh was hollow, bitter. "You want me to care about my impact? Fine, here's my impact, Al. Millions of people who love my music. Fans who come to my shows, who feel like I speak to something real in their lives. My impact is raising money for charity, supporting small towns, giving a voice to people who feel ignored. That's my impact. Not this fake outrage you and people like you keep bringing up every time you need a headline." Al shook his head slowly, his expression unreadable. "You keep calling it manufactured, but Jason, the reaction was real. The hurt was real. The concern was real. You can dismiss it all you want, but that doesn't make it disappear." Jason's jaw tightened. The hurt was manufactured. The outrage was manufactured. People were told to be upset, and they obeyed. If the media hadn't decided to blow this up, nobody would have cared. But you all needed a villain, and I was convenient. Al's tone turned sharp, his patience clearly gone. The room was electric with tension, every breath heavy as the confrontation edged past the point of no return. Al Roker fixed Jason with a pointed look. "So everyone who had a problem with your song was just a puppet being manipulated by the media? Nobody had genuine concerns? That's what you're saying?" Jason leaned forward, his frustration palpable. "I'm saying most people who claim to have a problem with my song never actually listened to it. They read a headline, saw a screenshot, heard someone else's interpretation, and decided I was guilty. That's not genuine concern, it's mob mentality." Al's finger jabbed slightly toward him, his irritation clear. "You know what I think, Jason? I think you knew exactly what you were doing with that song. I think you knew it would provoke a reaction. I think you knew the imagery would be controversial. And now that you've got the reaction, you're playing the victim." Jason's eyes widened at the accusation. "Playing the victim? You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to be in the middle of a national controversy? To have my name dragged through the mud? To have my family harassed? Nobody wants that, Al." Al's expression hardened further. "Then maybe you should have thought about that before releasing a song with loaded imagery and inflammatory lyrics. You're an experienced artist, Jason. You know how the media works. Don't pretend you're some naive victim who got blindsided." Jason's hands clenched into fists, not threateningly, but in sheer frustration. "I released a song I believed in, Al, a song about values I hold. I'm not going to apologize for that. I'm not going to second-guess every word, every image, every frame of a video, because someone might twist it into something it's not. That's not how art works. That's not how creativity works. If I have to run everything through a committee of people looking to be offended, I might as well stop making music." Al stepped closer, closing the space between them. "Nobody's asking you to run it through a committee. We're asking you to be thoughtful, aware, to consider the world we're living in. Is that really too much to ask?" Jason's voice rose, sharp and pained. "When being thoughtful means censoring myself, yes, it's too much to ask. When being aware means assuming the worst interpretation of everything I do, yes, it's too much. When considering the world we live in means I can't write about my own life and my own values without being called a bigot, then yes, Al, it's way too much to ask." Al's voice dropped, more intense. "Nobody called you a bigot, Jason." Jason laughed bitterly. "Oh, really? You want me to pull up the tweets, the articles, the think pieces? You want me to show you exactly what people called me? Bigot was one of the nicer terms. But sure, let's pretend that didn't happen. Let's pretend this whole thing was just people politely expressing concern. Those were individuals on social media," Al said. "I'm talking about legitimate criticism from people who actually analyzed your work." "Legitimate criticism?" Jason repeated sarcastically. "Right. Because writing an article about how my song is secretly about lynching, that's legitimate. Claiming I'm dog whistling to racists, that's legitimate. Saying I'm dangerous and my music should be pulled from the radio, that's all just thoughtful analysis? Give me a break, Al." Al's composure started to crack. "You're exaggerating what was said to avoid dealing with the substance of the criticism. That's a deflection tactic, Jason, and it's beneath you." "I'm exaggerating?" Jason's voice hit a new level of intensity. "I lived through this, Al. I read every article, every post, every comment. I know exactly what was said about me. And now you're telling me I'm exaggerating, deflecting, not taking responsibility. What exactly do you want from me? I want you to acknowledge that your song affected people negatively, Al said, firm and unwavering. I want you to show some understanding that your platform comes with responsibility. I want you to stop acting like everyone else is the problem and you're just an innocent bystander. Jason stared at him, chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. You want me to acknowledge that my song affected people negatively? Fine, my song affected people negatively. There, are you happy now? Does that fix everything? Does that make all the death threats and attacks on my family go away? Al shook his head. It's not about making anything go away. It's about growth, about understanding, about being better. Being better? Jason repeated slowly. You know what, Al? I've spent my entire career trying to be better. Trying to write better songs, put on better shows, be a better person. But apparently none of that matters because I wrote one song that people decided to be upset about. One song and now my entire character, my career, everything I've done. It's all erased because of one song people deliberately misinterpreted. Al's voice was steady, but heated. It's not erased, Jason. But yes, when you have a moment that significant, that controversial, it defines you until you properly address it. And you haven't. You've been defensive and dismissive from day one. Jason practically shouted now, his voice echoing through the studio. Because there was nothing to address, Al. I didn't do anything wrong. I wrote a song, that's it. I wrote a song about values I believe in, filmed a video in my hometown, released it like I've released dozens of other songs. The only difference is this time people decided to make it into something it wasn't. And now you're telling me I need to address it. I need to apologize. I need to grow. For what? For writing a song? Al's face was flushed, his voice matching Jason's intensity as he spoke. For writing a song that invoked painful history for a lot of people. For using imagery that brought up memories of violence and exclusion. For creating something that made people feel unwelcome and unsafe. That's what you need to address, Jason. Not the song itself, but the impact it had. Jason threw his hands up in exasperation. The impact it had on people who never even listened to it. The impact on people who were told to be outraged. You keep talking about this like it's some objective thing, Al. It's manufactured outrage. It's people who already didn't like me or my music finding a reason to attack. And you're giving them a platform to do it. Al's tone remained firm. I'm giving you a platform to explain yourself. Instead of taking that opportunity, you're attacking me, attacking the media, attacking everyone except yourself. You're not even willing to consider that maybe you made a mistake. Jason's voice rose with the tension of the argument. Because I didn't make a mistake. I made art, I expressed myself. I stood for something I believe in. If that's a mistake in your eyes, then I guess I'm guilty. But I'm not going to stand here and pretend I did something wrong when I know in my heart I didn't. Al took a deep breath, trying to regain composure. Jason, listen to me. I'm not your enemy here. I'm trying to have a conversation that needs to be had. Country music has a complicated history. Your genre, your industry, it's been exclusionary for a long time. And whether you intend it or not, when you release a song like Try That in a Small Town, you're tapping into that history. You're reminding people of that exclusion. Can you at least understand that? Jason's voice softened slightly but remained intense. Country music has been exclusionary? Al, country music is one of the most welcoming communities I've ever been part of. We celebrate our artists. We support each other. We bring people together. The idea that we're somehow exclusive is just another narrative pushed by people who don't actually participate in our community. Al pressed on. There are Black artists, Latino artists, LGBTQ artists who have spoken about feeling pushed out of country music, about not being accepted, about having to work twice as hard for half the recognition. Are they all lying? Are their experiences not valid? Jason's jaw clenched. I'm not saying anyone's lying. I'm saying their experience isn't universal. Just because some people feel that way doesn't mean the entire genre is racist or exclusionary. There are challenges in every industry, biases everywhere. But to paint all of country music and artists like me as the problem, that's not fair and it's not accurate. Al's voice rose again. But when those artists speak out, when they share their experiences, you and artists like you get defensive instead of listening. You make it about yourselves instead of hearing what they're saying. That's the problem, Jason. It's not just about one song. It's about a pattern of behavior. a refusal to acknowledge that there might be issues that need to be addressed. Jason shook his head violently. There you go again. A pattern of behavior, sweeping accusations without evidence. What pattern? What behavior? I've never discriminated against anyone. I've never excluded anyone from country music. But because I won't bow down and confess to sins I didn't commit, I'm part of the problem? That's insane. Al's voice dropped low, dangerous now. It's not insane, Jason, it's accountability. If you can't handle being held accountable for your work and your words, maybe you shouldn't be in the public eye. That was the final straw. Jason's face went from red to almost purple, his eyes blazing. Accountability? You want to talk about accountability, Al? How about your accountability? How about the accountability of the media that destroyed my reputation over a song? How about the accountability of people like you who sit in judgment without knowing the first thing about who I am or what I stand for? Where's that accountability? Al didn't flinch. I'm accountable to the truth, Jason. And the truth is that your song caused harm, whether you want to admit it or not. The truth, Jason said, his voice shaking, is that you and everyone like you decided what my song meant before I even had a chance to explain it. The tension between them was so thick it could be cut with a knife. Cameras struggled to keep both men in frame as the crew froze, unsure whether to intervene or let it play out. Both men were at the peak of frustration, standing face to face, their argument raw and unrelenting. This was no ordinary interview. This was a confrontation, a collision of art, responsibility, and public perception, and neither was willing to step back. Al's stance was firm, Jason's defiant, and the audience was left suspended in a charged silence, watching the battle unfold in real time, unable to look away.